Well, good evening, everyone. Thank y'all for coming out tonight. I want to thank you for taking time of your evening to come here tonight for us to share information with you about the Rayconda Dam and some information and programs that we think we have that may be of assistance to the community. But before getting started, I would like to recognize Mayor Nat Robertson in the back, Mayor Pro Tem Mitch Colvin, Councilmember Bill Crisp, Councilmember Jim Arp in the back as well, and Councilmember Kirk Deviere as well. Mr. Evans, he left. But again, thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank council as well for coming out as well. As you all know, on October 8th, Hurricane Matthew visited our community. It did a tremendous amount of damage to both yards, homes, but it also damaged several of the dams that we have throughout our community. To put it in perspective, we have, according to our tally, some 55 dams located in the city of Fayetteville. Of those dams, 45 of those are private. So that means that there are 10 which are either owned and maintained by the city of Fayetteville and or the Public Works Commission. Of those 55 dams, 45 again of which are private, one of those that is privately owned is the Rayconda Dam, and that's why we're here tonight. I want to start by saying that since October 8th, we have been working very hard with the City Council to try to identify ways in which we could bring our community back and get to some semblance of normalcy. Whether or not that was collecting all of the storm debris which accumulated, whether or not that was helping homeowners who were displaced from their homes, whether it was going after federal or state grants such as the Golden Leaf or working with FEMA to try to mitigate some of those activities. We have been hard at work since October 8th all the way until today, and the work continues. But one of the things that we have been unable to do, but we have looked quite hard, is how we would be able to assist private dam owners to be able to return those dams to service, as well as to bring back those lakes that were impounded by those dams. We here in the state of North Carolina have a strong state constitution and general statutes, some of which make it very difficult for us to be able to use public funds to improve private property. And so we spent literally, I think it was 4 city council work sessions looking at our existing or former dam policy that we have, which originally, anyone who recalls, was established years ago to try to help Rayconda primarily, which was focused at that point in time as a loan to help with maintenance on the dam at that time. But since that time, after the lake and the dam was breached, and we had, as I said, multiple lakes around the community and multiple dams around the community which were either breached because of the storm or received notices of insufficiency from DEQ, North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, that the dams were in poor repair and either had to be repaired or would have to be breached. The City Council and the staff went to work on trying to identify how we might be able to partner with some of those affected communities to be able to bring back those lakes and repair some of those dams. And again, it's been something that since October 8th, we have worked on along with all the other Hurricane Matthew recovery projects. But tonight we're joined by our partners that we've engaged, Freese and Nichols, who are here, and I'll bring up Charles Archer in just a moment, as project managers. They're project managers to help us try to restore both the public and the private dams to service, as well as to hopefully return some of the lakes into the views that you had before Hurricane Matthew. We have, if we didn't tell you on the way in, we will be recording this session, and it will be uploaded to YouTube. And so any of your neighbors who are unable to attend tonight, or if you'd like to go back at a later date and review some of the material that we hope to cover with you in just a moment, feel free to do so. We are also handed out question cards as you came in the door. Because this is being videoed and prepared for YouTube, we wanted to be able to have all of the comments and discussion be amplified using a microphone, but also having our camera trained here so that we'd be able to, again, upload it to YouTube. And so what we'll be doing is, as you go along, if you have questions, we'll ask that you write those questions down on the comment card, hold your hand up, and someone will go along and collect those cards. And at a point in time toward the end of the presentation, we will try to answer all of the questions as best we can related to Rayconda. But more information about those in the question and answer period will be given in just a moment. With that said and done, I would like to go ahead and bring up Charles Archer from Friesen Nichols, who will walk us through our agenda for tonight, which is on the screen. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out. We appreciate your being here. As was just mentioned, this is being recorded, and that's why we're asking for the questions that you all may have to write this down on the card. Just raise your hand when you're ready for it to be collected, and somebody will come by and pick it up. If you have another question that occurs to you while the conversation is going on, while questions are being answered, you want to follow up to an existing question, just write it down on another card, raise your hand, and we'll take your questions as long as we can this evening to get everyone's questions answered as best we can. So just raise your hand if you want to submit one, or you need a blank copy to write another question down on, and someone will come help you with that. What we hope to accomplish this evening is to go over the current dam policy that was adopted by the council in April of this year, to explain how that affects your particular situation, Rayconda Dam. The second item will be focusing on our funding options on how to restore that, restore your dam. And the third piece of the agenda is the process to do the engineering evaluations and schedules on the dams that may be assisted by the city. And also, if it moves to a design and construction, what the process is for that. And then the next steps moving forward after this evening's meeting. And then we'll take your questions that are written on the cards, and I'll read those questions out here, and then someone either from the city or from Friesen Nichols will answer the questions as best we can. Also, another housekeeping item, if you didn't sign up on the sign-in sheet when you came in, please do so on the way out so the city can have a record of who's here so we can follow up with you. And also on the comment cards, there's a place you check public or private. If there's an issue that's not related to the Rayconda Dam, you feel free to ask that question, and the city will have someone follow up with you as well to make sure that question can get answered. But our focus tonight is try to answer those questions about the Rayconda Dam and the process that the city has outlined through its policy to assist you all with that. So with that, let me move into what the policy is, and there'll be two slides here. And again, it's what applies to Rayconda is it's a privately maintained dam, privately owned dam, but it has a city street. It supports a city street on that dam. And so there's a particular section of the city policy that applies here. And so what triggers the potential city involvement in helping restore that dam? One is that it does support a city-maintained street, in which yours does, as you know. The other is if it's declared state of emergency or declared disaster by the state or federal government, also triggers the policy. And the third piece on this portion of the slide that's key here is that the repairs are not covered by any other state or federal funds, that FEMA's not coming in to help fix it, that state DOT's not coming in to help fix it, anything like that. If that's the case, the city may participate through what's called a special assessment process, which will be kind of the center of this presentation this evening. We'll talk more about that here in just a couple minutes. The second part of the policy where it triggers the city's participation is if the state dam safety board, which is a portion of a department of the Department of Environmental Quality, determines that major repairs are needed for your dam. That triggers this policy. If that's the case, the city will contribute 110% to preserve the structural integrity of the street that's supported by your dam. But that does exclude the emergency spillway. Any remaining cost after that 110% city participation for restoring the street portion may be funded by a special assessment that's imposed by the city council. And we'll talk about how that process works now. So what are your options under this policy to restore Rayconda Dam? One is you pay for it yourself. The homeowners get together, figure out how much it costs, hire an engineer, and you pay for it yourself. The other is, this falls under this policy, is a special assessment. And so what is a special assessment? That's probably the key question here. It's essentially where the city fronts the money to repair the dam. And then the homeowners or the benefited properties, not necessarily all the homeowners in Rayconda development that have to be an evaluation who was in an affected property, pays that back over time. The length of time and the interest rate that's associated with that special assessment is determined by the city council at the time that the special assessment might be imposed. So let's focus a little bit more particularly on what a special assessment does and how it works. So how this process specifically works for you. In the next few days, representatives from your homeowners association will get a letter with a sample petition from the city. This is a petition where they're asking the president of the homeowners association and the secretary of the homeowners association to sign that it's non-binding, but it's saying that we would like to explore the potential for a special assessment to have your dam repaired. That needs to be returned to the city by August 31st, so roughly 1 month to get that completed. So the purpose of that, why they're all due on August 31st, when you saw the earlier map, we don't know how many dams we're talking about yet. Is it going to be 2? Is it going to be 10? Is it going to be 15? We just don't know the scope of this yet. So the same opportunity is out there for those privately maintained dams that have a city street and just privately maintained dams within the city. They have the same opportunity as well, a little bit different part of the policy if it doesn't have a city street on it. But we've asked all those they'll all get the same letter with the same instructions with this sample petition to have those submitted to the city by August 31st. And then between the month of September and October, city staff working with the city council will sit back and look at all the petitions that are submitted to get an idea of how many we're talking about and some idea of what kind of cost we might be talking about and how to proceed. The city council then will make a decision on how to proceed, and part of what Freese and Nichols has been hired to help the city with is go through this process of evaluating the dams that were damaged that the city council wants to proceed with having evaluated. And what does that mean? We're going to look at it from an engineering and environmental regulation perspective to see how much is it going to cost to bring it back to standard so that it passes the requirements of the State Dam Safety Board. And that'll take us 2 to 5 months. That really varies. We don't know until we get out there in the field to determine what the extent of the investigation or evaluation is going to be on any given dam. But once we do those evaluations, we'll have a pretty good idea of what the cost is going to be to get that dam repaired. Then we'll come back and sit down with the city staff to determine who are the benefited properties. Just because you live in the Rayconda subdivision doesn't necessarily mean you are a benefited property. You may be, you may not be. It could be another property that's nearby, adjacent, upstream or downstream that's benefited by this. We have to look at not just the structural issues, but also the upstream, downstream impacts to this dam and who gains benefit from the dam being repaired. Once that's determined from that evaluation, there'll be another public meeting with everybody that is considered a benefited property. At that time, there'll be a presentation and opportunity for question and answer as well of what's proposed and how much it may cost. At that point in time, we'll be able to tell those benefited property owners what it's going to cost you. Then the next step would be for the benefited property owners to submit another petition, because now we'll know how much it costs and who stands to benefit from these improvements and how much it's going to cost you over time. And what the city is asking is that there will be another petition submitted by at least 60% of those benefited property owners asking for a special assessment. The reason they're asking for 60%, they're looking for a strong showing of support from the community that stands to benefit from the dam being restored before moving forward. After those final petitions are submitted, the City Council then goes through a legal process of having public hearings and other public meetings and interaction with those affected property owners or benefited property owners. And if it's the will of the City Council and the community, they can adopt what's called an assessment roll. At that time, you'll know what the terms are, the terms being how many years you have to pay it back and what the interest rate may be. All that is determined by what the financing may be at that point in time. This question came up in an earlier meeting, what the interest rate's going to be, and we won't know until it happens. But again, that's not something the city does to make money. They're just trying to cover the expenses of going through this process to help you all get this dam repaired. Once the council does adopt a special assessment role to restore a dam, then we get into the process of we got to do the design and go through the construction of getting the dam repaired. And this is a sample of what it might look like. The first is the city has to select an engineering firm to do the design for the dam repair. They have to go through a process in the general statutes for procurement of an engineering firm, and that takes 3 to 4 months to get through that process. They just can't go out and hire somebody like you might do to build you a deck or paint your house. They have to go through a very specific process. After that, they have to negotiate the contract with whomever they select. And then that firm begins the process of looking at the dam, looking at doing whether studies are needed from an engineering and an environmental evaluation, and at determining what the cost may be to restore the dam, and that will take 4 to 6 months, depending upon how much is involved in the study. That also includes getting permits, and there are at least 4 state and federal agencies that have to issue permits to restore a dam. There may be others depending upon the circumstances, but those are the Department of Environmental Quality for water quality purposes. They have to issue a permit. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has to issue a permit from an environmental perspective. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has to issue a permit from a floodplain perspective. And then also, again, the Department of Environmental Quality Dam Safety Board has to issue a permit from a structural integrity for the dam. So we have to work through all those, but once we get through the portion of having design, having permits and bid documents, then the city will solicit bids from qualified contractors to make the improvements. And that also takes 2 to 3 months to get through that process. And then finally, 4 to 12 months to actually make the repairs to the dam. So you're looking at, all told, to get through this petition process and get through getting the dams repaired, we're talking about 2 years. Maybe more, maybe less, depending upon the individual circumstances. And again, it's kind of hard to know tonight because we don't know what dams we're talking about and how many we're talking about at this point in time. So what are the next steps after this evening? I mentioned a moment ago that the representatives from your homeowners association will get a letter from the city with a sample petition. Again, that's a non-binding petition stating your interest in moving forward the next step for an engineering and an environmental evaluation of your dam. That needs to be returned to the city by August the 31st, and then the process will continue on. You'll know by the end of November what the next steps will be if you do submit that petition for that evaluation. The city will make those, council will make those decisions during the month of October and November of this year, and then we'll begin the actual evaluations as soon as they make their decision and get going on that process. So that's the next steps. So we're at the part of where we're talking about question and answers. Again, remind you that this is being videotaped to show on the city's website and on YouTube. That's why we're reading the questions out. So what I'll do is I'll read the questions that you've written down. And again, if you have a card ready to submit, or if you need another card, raise your hand. Someone will come help you. But I'll read the question and then direct it to the appropriate person to answer the question. And we'll stay here as long as we need to take your questions on these cards. So, first question. The first question is, can the City Council vote to use state money to repair the dam? Mr. Hewitt, you want to answer that one?
One of the things that the council has to look at in using its own money or the state money is the state constitution. And some of the same limitations about the city spending public resources to improve private property, the state also has some of those same restrictions as well. And so the answer to that question is no, is that we have not been able to identify a way, unless it is specifically earmarked or dedicated from the General Assembly, that would give us the authority to do that. The state constitution and statutes do not allow the city to use those funds to benefit directly private property owners, particularly around the lake. That is a question that we asked. That is a question that we pursued. And if you have information at this point in time that is contrary to that, please let us know at the end of it as well, and we'll be happy to run that down as well. But the same prohibitions that the city has, we also believe extend to the funds that come from the state as well.
You already addressed that in the last one. Another question, similar. Okay. Okay, I thought it was the law to not repair dams. Policies can be changed. Who votes to change the policy? I thought the law was not to repair dams. Policies can be changed. Who votes to change the policy?
There are several layers to this. First, the policy that we're talking about that the council adopted in April, modified in April, which would allow us to participate in the special assessment process that Charles covered, is a policy of the City Council. It is not a law. It means that the City Council extends that we would be willing to offer this. However, that policy is based upon North Carolina statutes, which say, or read rather, that we are able to offer a special assessment for certain activities, of which drainage control facilities, such as a dam that we're identifying here, could be one. And so while the policy that the council has, where they have said we're willing to pursue special assessments, can be changed, and the council did modify that to make it more inclusive, and to clarify it somewhat, that still does not trump what would be the law, which is state statute. As it relates to state statute, the state statute is also based upon our state constitution. And the state constitution is what includes the public purpose doctrine. And so it is layer upon layer. But the policy, the local policy that the council modified in April is what which allows us to be here tonight to offer to those affected communities with dams which were not only potentially breached, but also dams in the community that are private and were breached, gives us an opportunity through this process to assist those communities in bringing those dams and, of course, the dams, the lakes back.
Does the lack of hydrostatic water pressure outside of the PWC sewer line running through the lakes have the potential for sewage to now seep out of the pipes and into the swampy areas and lake bed? What assurances do the homeowners living adjacent to the lake have that the drain lake will not soon become a polluted swamp? And who will assume the monetary cleanup responsibilities? Mr. Glass, you want to answer that?
Yeah, my name's Joe Glass. I'm the engineering manager for PWC Water and Sewer Department. The sewer lines are, I guess for lack of a better term, self-contained. We run cameras through there and check for leaking joints. We inspect the manholes. So the lack of a lake there doesn't really affect the sewer line. We're constantly monitoring our sewer lines to see if there is any leakage in, thus any leakage out. So whatever condition they were in before the lake was drained is pretty much the way it is now, and we're routinely checking.
Next question. Will the city ask property owners if they want to pay any special assessments to fix the dams, or will the city be asking the Development Homeowners Association? The reason for the question, in the mid-1990s, our homeowners association accepted the private lakes in Rayconda without asking the property owners. Many of us did not want the dams, lakes, or liabilities that come with them. So the question is, will the city be asking the property owners about the special assessment, or will they be asking the HOA about the special assessment?
It's an excellent question. We will be asking both. We'll be using the HOA to help us reach and collect what we hope will be the petitions for us to begin the process, the ones which will be due by August 31st. But as the assessment would be for all of the property owners that would benefit from the work, the ultimate decision will be the one that the council will make, will be based upon the feedback that they receive from the property owners. In Rayconda, I know that there are, I don't know that the HOA, this is from history, that there may be two HOAs. There may be an HOA around the lake and there may be an HOA somewhere else. Our interest, and the same interest you have in having an HOA, is that it provides a useful way for us to disseminate information as well as as a point of contact for city staff. But when we have the petition, which will go out to the HOAs to help us identify the interest to move forward by August 31st, as well as if the council moves forward ultimately in issuing a special assessment for those improvements, there would be a series of public hearings as well. And the council would be mainly interested in talking to the property owners, because it would be the property owners, not the HOA, who would be assessed for the repairs.
If public funds are used, is the property accessible by the public? So I guess a special assessment is used to repair their dam as public funds that will be repaid, or property will that be accessible by the public? Rob?
The answer is yes. There's two pieces. One, if the public funds are used, there will have to be a public access piece of that, and that will be determined at that time. Also, when public funds are used, there will be a stormwater function, so the lake will perform a little differently than just being an amenity lake. It will also perform as a stormwater device. So it may fluctuate a little more than what you have seen in the past, where amenity lake is usually held at a single level. A stormwater function would mean that it would be fluctuating depending on what the weather dictates, whether the rainfall, to help collect some of the stormwater.
Briefly describe the process of determining benefited homeowners. What are typically the top 3 or 4 factors in determining benefited?
As Rob just mentioned a moment ago, Rob Stone, Director of Public Services, this would not be an amenity lake. It would not be something that would be designed differently, it would be maintained differently, and it would, just say, a flood control device. And so the idea is that, particularly the folks who would be sending drainage to and from that area, to that area, would be the benefited property owners. And that would be part of the initial assessment that we would undertake. The folks in Rayconda probably remember very well, don't know if it was 2006 or 7 when we first came out, and there was an interest from the homeowners or a portion of Homeowners Association in Rayconda with borrowing money from the city to make improvements to that lake, to the dam and to the apparatus around the lake coming in across Sipple. At that point in time, there were a lot of conversations that the property owners who live in Rayconda had amongst yourselves, and that was a question that was asked by many folks. Only thing I do is cross Sipple Avenue. That's the only thing I can't fish in it. Doesn't back up my backyard. I have very limited use. Well, with a special assessment, we have to go through a process of identifying those folks who benefit. And that is at times can be somewhat tricky. It can be somewhat hard. But in this situation, if it is truly a drainage amenity, then a drainage facility, then the folks who would benefit may be some of your neighbors who live on the other side of Sipple, depending on how the lake or the area drains and using it as a flood control or stormwater device. And so that would be something that we would have to look at. But the folks is anyone here that lives out near the Pinewood Terrace area? Just kind of raise your hand. That's probably maybe one of the furthest points away from the lake, if I can recall correctly. The benefit that you would have would be different than the benefit that people whose property backs up directly to the lake would be. But under the special assessment, we have to look at the benefited property owners, and whoever benefits, they would have to be assessed in a similar fashion. But that would be something that we would have to look at once we go out and determine what needs to be done in order for a special assessment to be issued, as well as for this to serve in that form. So right now it's kind of hard to say, but it's easy to say if you can identify no way in which you would benefit from this, then that would also be something that when we would have the public hearings, if your property were listed, you would definitely want to make sure that you made known. But in order for this to work, it has to be property owners who would benefit from this improvement.
What is being done now to secure the aqua water line exposed at the lower dam?
I know that Aqua has looked at this and has assessed this, and I'm not sure. We will have to follow up to see if there's a timetable that they have in place to look at repairing that. I don't think it has suffered any damage to the actual water line itself other than being exposed, but we will have to follow up on that question.
Did the building of the VA Center in Woodland Village contribute to the Rayconda breach?
One of the items that's been in place since the VA was built is the council stormwater ordinance, city council stormwater ordinance, and what that does is that takes into account the amount of stormwater that would have been on site before the VA hospital was built. If you've been by the VA, you'll see the big stormwater devices that are out there, the ponds. Those are designed to collect the stormwater and then put it back out at a rate similar to what was there before the VA was constructed. Unfortunately, with this type of water and this type of event we had, there is nothing that would have prevented this event. So to answer the question, yes or no, is no. This, from what we can see, that just the building of the VA there did not contribute to the breach.
Next question. Will Sipple Avenue be closed as of September 30, 2017, as originally proposed?
If you'll recall, there was already a plan in place because the dam had been rated as high hazard, and there was already a process put in place to eliminate the traffic on the dam and to construct a new, what we call a Piney Grove extension coming off from opposite of the VA hospital. This process was already in place beforehand, and the plan, an initial plan, was to not close the road, but to turn it over to the homeowners association and limit any traffic from going over, just like the previous, the other dam. And I'm trying to think of the street. Ancon, thank you. Ancon Street had been very similar. So once the new road was constructed, the existing road over the dam would have been limited to just either pedestrian or some other type. So part of the dam being considered high hazard was the fact that there was vehicles using it. And so if there was a breach, it could cause loss of life. So that was part of that process was in place. So what has been pursued, and I think Mr. Chris may have been involved in a good bit of this, was to look at, since we had to do an emergency construction, a reconstruction of Sipple Avenue, because it was the only entrance in and out of the neighborhood, we were able to do an emergency construction with that by FEMA allowed us to go through without having to go through all the permitting that Charles mentioned previously. We would do that as an emergency and actually reestablish the road with the culvert. So that left the dam breached. So in the process, we've also, if you've been out there lately, you've seen that the construction of Piney Grove extension is ongoing, and it's moving forward. It will be completed not too long. So the answer is right now, that entrance we're pursuing so that will still be city maintained. Sipple Avenue, what we have seen from the breach is there was a need for more than one entrance into the community. And so now it's no longer high hazard. So there's no reason to not have it still city maintained. The issue was that there was already a process put in place to turn over the maintenance at a certain date. It's already been recorded in the courthouse, so we're having to kind of back that process up, and we're still working that with our city attorney's office. But to answer the question, so that right now the plan is that Sipple Avenue will now be still be city maintained. That's one reason why the sign was removed. So I hope that answers the question.
Why is the Rayconda Dam breach not considered to be a result of unprecedented rainfall from Hurricane Matthew, thus not qualifying for hurricane relief funding?
It wasn't that there was no doubt that this extreme event is what caused the breach. The issue of where it's not qualifying for FEMA funding is that it was privately maintained. FEMA funding was only eligible for infrastructure that could be proven to be municipality or governmental maintained. So that it wasn't the fact that it was definitely breached, it's just that it was a private dam. The city had no record of maintaining the dam itself, even though we were maintaining the street.
PwC says they maintain 4 dams. Is Rayconda's dams one of them, considering the fact that their sewage lines were built and run the entire length of both the upper and lower lakes? I hear the answer is no?
No, that's not maintained by the city, the Rayconda Dam. The dams that you have are Glenville. It's one on, what is that road? Kane Road?
Yeah, there's 4 in
Yeah. Yeah.
from Glenville that are water supply.
Yeah, those are the ones.
Okay. The next question is about the special assessment, and the question is, can only properties in the city limits be assessed and not those in the county or Hope Mills?
The town of Hope Mills has the same statutory authority to issue special assessments as the city. And our statutory authority is found in 160 and 160A. The county also has authority which is different. Maybe it's a little broader in certain areas and more narrow in others, but they also have authority in the county to issue special assessments as well.
Why weren't the funds for the Pinewood Terrace extension diverted to restore the upper lake?
That goes back again to the question about per the state legislation, public funds cannot be used on a private facility. That's the reason. The roadway was still in process. There was already a plan in place to do that. And unfortunately, the dam, those funds could not be used for anything but that particular thing. The dam could not be used, those funds could not be used for repair of the dam.
Any more questions? One couple in the back. Do you need a card, sir? If we can get you a card. So. If you would jot that down so we can read it out. So. So if you would just jot your question down, we'd be happy to read it out. But so, could someone help the gentleman with his question?
We'll take a stab at that one just to go ahead and get him out of
Okay.
Unfortunately, the existing culvert that is there now could not just be converted to a lake. Again, this was an emergency repair. If it is deemed that the dam is going to be built back, it would have to be built to current standards, and that is extensive means of permitting. And it would not be built back as it was. When you start looking at it now, it would be brought up to current standards. It wouldn't be brought up to where it was at. It'd be brought up based on all the other flows in from the area and also what it needs to be used for. So again, we mentioned that if public funds were to be used, it would be used as a stormwater to help manage some of the stormwater flow in the area. So that dam would be a lot different than what it is now. So. Have public access.
This next question is this the beginning of the end for all private lakes and dams?
I would say that the state of North Carolina, with the hurricanes that we've had, they have, as many of you have seen as well, with 55 dams in the community, 45 of which are private. The only difference between Rayconda and probably half of those other dams which were not breached by Hurricane Matthew is just that they weren't breached at the moment. We have a country club, and Mayor Pro Tem had stepped out of the room. It's one literally up from my house off of Ramsey Street, which received notice of severe deficiency from North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, and if it has not been breached, a breach plan will likely be ordered for that dam as well. And on a weekly basis, I receive letters from DEQ for all of the dams which are at various stages of deficiency, and we are working very hard with DEQ to make sure that they understand that the city has no ownership interest or maintenance records for those 45 private dams, some of which sadly were breached and some of which are in extreme states of disrepair. The state is taking a very aggressive track, as you can imagine, as they should, because what happens if a dam breaches, not only for the values and the enjoyment of the people who live in that subdivision, but for all of the property owners who might be downstream from that dam. And that was what, I think it was Wood Lake, if that was Wood Lake, that was recently in the news as well, where the state had real concerns about the maintenance of that and what it would mean if that dam were to fail. The beginning of the end, I don't know, but I think that if you go into a neighborhood and you see that they have a beautiful lake, I think it's important and imperative to find out who maintains it, and it's important and imperative to figure out what the maintenance records are for that, so that we don't end up with more situations like the ones that sadly affected Rayconda, Aaron Lakes, Loch Lomond, and several other communities.
Okay, this next question is, how or why is Mirror Lakes Dam under the city's care and not other neighborhoods like Rayconda? So why is Mirror Lake considered maintained by the city and not Rayconda?
One of the things that I wish I had a more definitive answer is that I'm not sure how some of the dams that we have acquired were acquired for public maintenance. It very well could be that when the road was put in or was conveyed over to the city, that the dam was also conveyed. But the issue is not just about who owns it, it's also about who has maintained it. And in our records, because it was something that the city had maintained, it is something that FEMA is able to reimburse us for. That is also, but that predates me a little bit, but we are pushing on that question, trying to identify that answer. But the simple point is, when posed with the question, what does ownership look like? Ownership looks like who has been maintaining it and who has maintenance records of that work. And the city has performed or contracted the maintenance for Mirror Lake. We have those records, and it is based upon those records that we believe that FEMA will reimburse us for all of the work to restore the road, the dam, and by that as well, the lake. Yes, sir.
Any questions? Any other questions out there?
In 2003,
Sir, if you could write it down so we can capture your question. Could you write it down for us so you could capture the question? Right here. While he's doing that, just a reminder that the video of tonight's meeting as well as the slides will be up on the city's website tomorrow. That's FayettevilleNC.gov/roads. So you can take a look at the results of this meeting. It's also at the bottom of the slide here. And if you have a question or someone that wasn't here for the meeting tonight that has a question that's caused by viewing the material, there's a process that they can send a question in by email and get answers back so everybody can have the same information. This next question, the lake/dam issues are hurting Rayconda property values. What benefit is the repairs? Property values, use, and appearance. What is the city doing about our values?
One of the things that you all recall is that before Hurricane Matthew, the City Council had committed to a capital improvement projects for the extension of Pinewood Terrace. Rayconda, as I mentioned, was the reason that the City Council even had a policy for us to even modify from starting in January. That is the only reason. And it is because your neighborhood, your HOA, and your council members felt strongly enough about whenever you've asked a question that we would explore it. We've asked a question about how we might be able to use public funds to improve private lake and the dam. and we've not been able to find an answer that will allow us to do that. Are property values impacted by the homes which abut Rayconda's lake, which is, yes, I imagine that they are. But also in a sense of equity, there are property owners who are here whose property does not abut the lake. And those were, again, some of the same conversations and discussions that we had with you back in 2006 or 7 when the council authorized up to $1 million, $500,000 loans to allow, to help maintain the dam. And so the property values are a real concern to the council, to the city council, but more important is the community identity. And that was what could not have been better said and stated than the fact that the Homeowners Association, after Sipple Avenue washed out, they didn't wait for the city to come out. Y'all mobilized. You know what you did out on Ancon. You know what you do on Ancon every year when you close it and you actually have almost like a community day. That sense of community is real important to the city council. But again, we have not been able to find a way to use public funds to repair the breach of that private dam. But we do believe the special assessment process would give us an opportunity to maybe address that issue using our statutory authority.
This question was asked earlier, but maybe we need to re-answer it. It says, please explain the process or criteria for determining benefited properties.
Probably the best way to answer this question would be as a result of the engineering evaluation that is done. It'll determine not only are the people adjacent to the lake benefited, but also are property owners either upstream benefited or downstream benefited based on stormwater attenuation and things like that. The criteria used will be talked about at public forums. We'll make sure that everyone has input into that, just to make sure that everybody can understand what the assessment will be and who the benefited people are going to be defined as.
In 2003, the city manager said there were no city-owned lakes. How and when did this change?
I can't speak to what the manager at that time, which would have been Roger Stansel, what question he was answering. If it is on the face value, does the city own lakes? Then the answer should have been yes, because we had Glenville Lake and others which are owned and maintained by the city's Utility Public Works Commission. Mirror Lake, I think that the ownership and the maintenance, again, as I stressed, is really about who maintains the dam. That was there. I think we also had Devonwood, where we had maintenance records that the city had been maintaining the Devonwood Dam. But as it relates to the question that the manager in 2003 was answering, either the question was received by him differently, but in 2003, the city, through its utility, would have owned Glenville Lake and it's probably one or two others, three others. And in 2003, I'm almost sure that we were also providing maintenance on Mirror Lake's dam as well as Devonwood. I don't recall there being any action. I came in 2004 and left for a spot and spell, but I don't recall that. So,
any other questions out there? Okay. Again, thank you all for coming this evening and for submitting your questions. If you, again, urge your neighbors that couldn't be here this evening to look at the video and look at the slideshow online and submit their questions. And please encourage your leadership of your homeowners association, if you're all so inclined, to submit that preliminary petition before August 31st so the city council can consider Rayconda Dam further. Again, thank you for coming and be careful going home.